My name is Esteban Ocares, Senior Systems Engineer for the Southwest, and now we're talking about closing remote office branch office opportunities with Nutanix. A recent customer win with us was a high-tech company that was looking at a large 100 remote office branch office environment project. So for them, some of the key factors and pain points were they had to collapse these remote offices back into a central location, get their data centralized, but also keep some services at each of the offices. This meant that they had to have some sort of infrastructure running at each one of these ROBO locations and then replicating to a centralized spot. Today they were doing 3-tier architecture, so they had siloed infrastructure, a lot of finger pointing, and a lot of operational inefficiencies. They wanted to make that an easier stack to manage. This is where Nutanix is going to make a ton of help for them. Also, they were looking at cost. At scale, with servers and storage at each of these ROBO locations, also running a hypervisor licenses, you can imagine the cost would be pretty outstanding. They also had a lot of pain around upgrading and updating each of those locations. A lot of version drift, and management took them sometimes all year just to get all those offices caught up. So we can combat these in a bunch of different ways. Nutanix Prism Central will actually let you manage at scale and keep that version drift to a minimum. We can also standardize on hardware sets, and with our Acropolis hypervisor, we can actually lower that licensing cost from a VMware perspective as well. Some of the challenges we faced with this customer were around introducing new technology. We spent quite a bit of time educating that customer on Nutanix and how our architecture and design worked. We also had to combat your traditional 3-tier model, where we had server vendors and storage vendors and Fabric already in there vying for a piece of this ROBO pie. We also wanted to prove the viability of Acropolis. Introducing a new hypervisor can be very scary for your end customer, so showing them how rock solid it was, how easy it was to manage, played a big part in the sales process. We also wanted to understand their purchasing and deployment cycles. Adopting a large amount of hardware and sending that out to many different offices can be daunting. By standardizing on a 1000 series, we were able to give them very predictable pricing and a very easy way to deploy that remote office branch office infrastructure. So digging a little deeper into competition, when we talk about the server and storage vendors that were already in there were plenty of politics and relationships that were built in. So understanding who the stakeholders were and what type of investment they already had in our architecture was pretty key. They had to play on their current skill set since they understood their 3-tier model. Introducing a new hyperconverged model meant for them new training. Now, Nutanix is very, very easy to manage and actually scale, so we were able to combat that with some proof of concept demos. Also, we wanted to combat this new fear around hyperconverged infrastructure. Spending some time, doing some training with the customer, some whiteboarding sessions, also showing them architecture, best practices, and reference architectures really helped them feel comfortable with Nutanix. All I can say is, when combating competition, educate. Take the time to really show the customer how we do what we do. Now let's talk about closing the deal. A big piece of this project was cost. Obviously, a very large number of sites meant a large infrastructure amount, and that meant high cost. When you run an ROI report, as we did for this customer, we really showed them the operational efficiencies that cut down on that cost. Also, by eliminating the VMware licensing and putting in Acropolis hypervisor, we shaved off millions of dollars from what that deployment would look like in anything else but Nutanix. The management, security, and scalability for them was a huge decision factor that they couldn't really operate with their traditional 3-tier. Also, no risk of underbuying or overbuying. By starting small with 3 servers, if those remote offices ever grew, they can easily add nodes to scale, which in 3-tier architecture, they have to kind of buy it all up front. So let's talk about the resources we used to help close this deal as well. This customer, we actually leveraged an executive visit, brought down some executives from corporate office to talk to the customer about the company as well as our roadmap. I think this is pretty important about selling Nutanix in general. We also had our support and performance team help along with the POC testing that we did for them to show them the viability of Acropolis hypervisor as well as what this would look like at scale for 100 branch offices. Best practices in reference architecture, that documentation helped the customer feel comfortable and really see the nuts and bolts, how that solution would work for them. Also, we had some customer references that were also doing remote office branch office, not at this particular scale, but showing the customer the viability of that solution really helped. So some takeaways for you. Take advantage of the Nutanix field teams. The SCs and the sales reps can really help educate your customer on how Nutanix works and what that design and architecture looks like. Can't say it enough, ROI and TCO can really help sell a deal. In this particular deal, removing the VMware cost from the equation and substituting it with Acropolis Hypervisor, which actually comes included in the cost of Nutanix, was a huge proponent of making that ROI look amazing over 5 years. Also, when it calls for it, don't be afraid to do a POC or demo, especially when you're positioning Acropolis. We really want to show customers what that looks like and how easy it is to manage. Again, personalities and roadblocks. This particular customer, we had some troubles with previous vendor relationships, but we're really able to overcome that with cost and education. Thank you for your time, and remember, the Nutanix field team is always here to help.